Hello and welcome to the World Soccer Talk podcast, your weekly dose of talking about watching soccer on TV, online and apps. Coming up on episode 69, we discuss the latest details about VAR debuting at the World Cup this summer. We feature an interview with Charlie Stillitano about the concept of a European Super League, news about LaLiga TV launching in the United States, the launch of yet another new soccer streaming service, as well as our thoughts on NBC's coverage of Man City winning the title. Plus, we have letters from you, the listeners, and Peter Drury. Yes, the one and only commentator, Peter Drury, has sent us in a letter in response to last week's podcast, and that's in our mailbag section. That plus much, much more. My name is Christopher Harris, a.k.a. The Gaffer. I'm joined today by Kartik Krishnaiyer. Both Kartik and I had a chance this week to go see the World Cup trophy. I've never seen it before, Kartik, up close and in person. What were your thoughts about the actual trophy itself?
Yeah, it was quite a thrill to see it up close in person, and I think it's created a lot of buzz that we were there and we got to see it, and a lot of my colleagues are envious/jealous, but it was quite an experience, and I think the thing that's so interesting is that the trophy is, I go back and forth on this, but it is very small. And I think most people realize it's very small, but when we saw it, it was actually bigger than I thought it was based on what you see on television.
Yeah, that's so it's the first time I've seen it in person, and to me it was thick, a lot thicker than I thought it would be. It was I thought it'd be skinnier and taller. Is kind of in my mind. I mean, seen it on television, thousands of times, but actually the thickness of the actual trophy was impressive. But yeah, it was great to see the World Cup trophy, and who knows who will be getting their hands on that this summer. So, Kartik, before we go into what we've been watching this past week, what are your thoughts about the Premier League in general? I mean, to me, it was the most anticlimactic Premier League title winning day in years. Of course, on Sunday with West Brom beating Man United and then handing the trophy to Man City. To me, it kind of summed up this season. It's been not the greatest by any means.
Yeah, I think the two worst seasons in the 26 seasons now of the Premier League have been the last two. And I think the standard of play has gone down. So, I mean, as much as we can throw superlatives, I know we're going to do this in a minute, so I won't share too much superlatives at Manchester City. I think that they have benefited from a weakened league, and a league where teams are either I don't even know how to describe this. I mean, I think tactically teams are in transition. I think the league's identity is kind of a mixed bag now, and you could say, well, the league is more cosmopolitan than other leagues in Europe. That's certainly true, but I also think that there's that's to the detriment of continuity and style of play and level of play. So I haven't been a fan of the Premier League this season. I don't think it's a very good league. We can get into Manchester City in a minute, but I'm not sure winning the Premier League means it. I mean, it's a title, it's a trophy, but I don't think it means what it did when United's treble side won a very competitive Premier League, or the Premier League winners from 2005 to 2009, Manchester United winning 3 on the balance with Cristiano Ronaldo in ultra hyper competitive leagues at the top.
Yeah, it's not just England though. I mean, City won the title 16 points ahead of second place United. Germany, where Bayern Munich have already won the title and are 20 points ahead of second place team. France, where PSG won 7-1 against Monaco at the weekend to lift the title. I watched maybe the last 10
and Monaco's in second. Keep in mind, so that tells you the gap there.
So it's been very underwhelming season in general. It just seems that the focus has this season more than others really shifted to the Champions League, and we're starting to see kind of a split now. Whether this is a temporary split or between kind of the first and second, or if it's a long-term split. And to me, it kind of points towards a European Super League, or at least the possibility of taking these heavyweights and having more of a league format. But we'll get into that a little bit later. That's one of the questions I asked Charlie Stillitano about ICC, International Champions Cup, and whether that's almost a replacement for the idea of a European Super League. But we'll get into that in a little while. But Kartik, so what have you been watching this past week?
Yeah, so obviously started the weekend with that Southampton-Chelsea game, as so many else did, and thought, okay, Sparky has finally had an impact on Southampton. They're winning 2-0, although in very Sparky-esque style. I can tell you this from his time managing Manchester City. when I watched every one of his games, and the QPR. Fulham was a little more solid, but then Stoke, where 2-0 leads. I mean, the old adage is 2-0 is the most dangerous scoreline in football. Well, it's even more dangerous if Mark Hughes is your manager, and it just inexplicable. Olivier Giroud comes on. You know his proficiency in the area on set pieces or on crosses. Not marking him or giving him the kind of space is inexcusable. He knocks in 2 goals. Chelsea wins. It was a good start to the weekend for NBC. NBC doing this. How would I describe it? They switched their commentary teams this weekend.
Pundits exchange.
Right, an exchange. Right, that would be it. So that's how I started the weekend. Then watched Swansea Everton. That was a frustrating match. I bet it was even more frustrating for you because I don't think Everton were even playing football in that match, with the exception of brief spells, and poor Kyle Naughton just got caught in the wrong place, put in an own goal. Just one of the flukiest own goals you'll ever see. And Swansea had to rescue a point. They should have had 3 points from that match. It could be 2 points. And Chris, this is very near and dear to your heart. It could be 2 points that cost them, that they didn't get, that they should have gotten from that match.
It could be. It's to me, at the end of the day, I'm happy with the points, because actually towards the end of the match, it looked like Everton could have got a winner in this one.
That was the first time Everton looked good in the game.
Yeah.
Actually.
So at the end, I was really nervous, but definitely 2 points dropped. But they created more of the chances. I'm okay. I think in terms of the way that they're playing, the confidence is good. They just need to keep on getting these points, even if it's a point here, a point there. It adds up, and hopefully that's enough to cause a bit of a small gap between Southampton and Stoke, and then Swansea above them. But lots of games to be played though still.
And I have to say that the thought that Southampton or Stoke is going to get going are based on their pedigree from previous seasons. Obviously, Southampton has finished in the top half of the table the last 5 seasons, I think, prior to this, and Stoke had finished no lower than 9th until last season in a while. But both those clubs have just had horrid years. There's nothing in how either of those teams are playing or performing that leads you to believe that they would get the points to catch Swansea. So you're right. It might be enough, that point, but it's just, we keep thinking, well, it's Stoke, it's Southampton, it's not your traditional yo-yo team, so they're going to get going at some point. But maybe they're not.
Yeah, both Stoke and Southampton remind me of West Ham United under Avram Grant, where they had a season that was, they actually were playing good football, but they would go 2-0 ahead, and just like Southampton or just like Stoke would end up losing 3-2, and it was just a frustrating season for Hammers, I'm sure, for Iron fans. And it's the same thing with Southampton and Stoke. I'm not going to count them out yet, because they still have some good players on that team that are fighters, but whether or not they show up, we'll have to wait and see.
Well, Robbie Mustoe said it the other day on NBC. I lost track of the days this week. They played Monday or Tuesday, or one of those days on Goal Zone. It must have been Tuesday, because Monday it was still Lee Dixon and Graham. So what Mustoe said is, it's hard to see Stoke playing any better than they've been playing, and they're getting draws or losing matches. It's hard to see them actually playing any better than they have. So they're probably done.
That's the challenge, because I mean those players keep on playing at a level. They're fighting, they're trying, and they keep getting like sucker punches. And I think sometimes professional athletes can only go at that level, kind of playing at the high level, even going for it, and then go like, this is ridiculous, because every time we do that, we end up losing these matches. But a lot of it's individual errors, though, whether it's Charlie Adam getting a red card, or it's just it's just simple mistakes, and that's when the pressure's on, and that's what causes teams really in many ways to go down. To me, it's actually, this could be a really interesting relegation battle. We talked about before about the Premier League. The title race has been well and truly over for a long, long time, but this relegation battle could easily go into the final day. You've got Stoke City's playing Swansea on the last day of the season, and of course other matches too, but this could easily go into the final day. The other thing is Huddersfield. Huddersfield has the toughest record from now to the end of the season. I think they're playing, Chelsea, Man City, Arsenal. All of their games on paper look like they've got no chance of getting any points. this could be a really interesting relegation battle. Hopefully, there'll be some excitement there on that level at least.
Yeah, that's why Huddersfield, same time as the Swansea match, getting a late winner was just absolutely critical from Tom Ince. Moving on, Liverpool and Bournemouth. Watched that match. That was Derek Ray and Kyle Martino. That was an interesting broadcast, and two really great talents, two of our favorites on the show, working together, and it was crisp. They had chemistry right off the bat. I mean, I'm sure they've done some trial runs, but that was very good. And then Spurs and Man City, obviously, was a decisive victory for Manchester City, surprisingly, at Wembley. Very comprehensive performance. We did not know it was going to be a title-winning match, so we'll obviously get to that in a minute. Next day, I watched United and West Brom from about the 30th minute on. Did not have the level of expectation that West Brom would win, but I have to point out that they've won 3 of their last 5 trips to Old Trafford and have done well at the Hawthorns, also against United. So they're a bit of a bogey team, particularly for Moyes and Van Gaal, but now also for Mourinho. Still, it was a result that no one saw coming, and Manchester City wins the title because of that. We'll get to the goal zone breakdown of goal zone and NBC's coverage in a minute. Milan-Napoli was a huge match. Really felt like Napoli needed 3 points, and by not getting 3 points in this match, by drawing this match, they were out of the title race. Well, lo and behold, on Wednesday, Crotone gets a draw, fighting relegation. They're in the relegation spot right now. They're in 18th in Serie A. Gets a point against Juventus. Napoli comes from behind to beat Udinese 4-2, and now game on. The biggest match in Europe, maybe the biggest league match in Europe all season. In the top league, Juve and Napoli this Sunday, from Turin. So that's it's only a 4-point gap in Italy, but I think there's still just this kind of feeling. Okay, Juve they're gonna play out a draw in this game on Sunday and be okay. I do have to point out though they still play Inter and they still play either Lazio or Roma after that, Juventus. Whereas Napoli is kind of clear in terms of their fixtures. So. And now it's only a 4-point gap.
I was going to say that let's hope that this Juventus-Napoli game on Sunday lives up to the promises. I mean, we've had so many, well, not so many, but we have had some Serie A matches, some big matches, some like really, really ones that are going to kind of dictate the top of the table, and they end up being 0-0 ties. Nothing wrong with that, but sometimes it's just it's hard to break through some of those defenses. Yeah. So let's hope that Sunday's going
and we know this is a contrast in styles, right? Juve is probably going to defend deep. Napoli likes to keep the ball. They're one of the more entertaining sides in Europe, if not the most entertaining side. So there's no incentive for Allegri to open up in this match. So it could be a 0-0. It very realistically could be. Mm-hmm. And look, a point is fine for Juve, right? It's like I said, it's a 4-point gap. It's Napoli that has the impetus to attack in these 3 points. So watch that, and then Monday. Speaking of relegation fights, Mainz and Freiburg, I was pretty excited about this match. Thought, okay, so Freiburg is in 15th and Mainz is in 16th. So this is direct competition for the spot in the relegation playoff that Germany has. And it's a big game. Mainz going to have to win this. If Freiburg gets a draw, given the remaining fixture list, they're probably okay. And it was a good first half. And I mean, I think everybody knows where I'm going.
well, actually, no, I don't think everyone does, though. So I mean, a big relegation battle in the Bundesliga. Of course, we've talked about this endlessly this season with the Bundesliga having VAR in place and seemingly being one of the better VARs. Not perfect by any means, but what happens right before halftime, Kartik?
Well, so. There's I guess what you would say, a missed penalty call where Mainz felt that they should be awarded a penalty. The referee blows for halftime. The teams go into the dressing room, and lo and behold, VAR after 7 minutes, it seems, right? 5 minutes, 7 minutes, something like that. Well, it didn't take that long it took that long because he had to call the teams back out from the dressing room and have a penalty taken. Awarded Mainz a penalty. They converted. They go up 1-0. They score a second goal late in the second half, but it completely altered because I just, when you're a professional athlete, I don't know how mentally you come out of the dressing room and have a penalty.
Right, because you switch off. You switch off. You think, okay, right, we got to halftime. Okay, let's take a breather. Let's get hydrated. Let's listen to the coach. And now all of a sudden, referees come knocking on the door saying, "Sorry, but we have to go back out. VAR has noticed that there should be a penalty, so get ready."
Yeah, it was just there are reasons for VAR, and those reasons have been outlined and articulated over and over again. And I think one of the things that it's done in MLS is that I think there's been an outlandish amount of referee abuse in Major League Soccer or in American soccer in general, lower divisions too, from fans, from players, from even the leagues themselves. And, there are clubs that club officials, club social media accounts, club PR departments accosting referees, publishing names of referees, personal information that happened with Orlando City last year. So VAR takes a little bit of the pressure off those referees. And I think that is a good thing, because referee abuse, and we saw it again in the Juve Real Madrid with Michael Oliver in the Champions League. Referee abuse, I think, is one of the biggest problems in world football. Mm-hmm. Everybody likes to blame the official and scapegoat the official. You're just not going to get talented officials to either referee matches, to go into this profession, or make those tough calls for fear of the retribution and ramification. So I think VAR is a good tool in that it takes some of the pressure off of the center refs. But right now, it is clear to me. I don't think and unfortunately, FIFA is going forward with it for this summer for the World Cup. It is clear to me that it is in untested kind of experimental mode, and it hasn't been. It's not ready for prime time, which might explain why the Premier League has rejected it for another year.
Yeah,
wisely in my mind.
I think so too. Yeah. So what happened in Kartik? So the penalty was converted.
It was converted by mine. So they go up 1-0. They go back into the dressing room, and then come back out up 1-0. And Freiburg looked shell-shocked, completely shell-shocked for the next 15 minutes. Then started to play.
So what's the impact of this decision? What could the impact be on this season for these two clubs?
They're both now tied with 30 points, and Mainz is ahead on goal difference. So they're out of the relegation playoff spot, and Freiburg has slipped into it by virtue of this result. Now, granted, the call was the correct call, but it's still, we're so used to human error and not looking at a contested possible penalty call 15 times before making a determination. Because I think if you look at a replay of a potential foul long enough, you convince yourself it's a foul.
So, Kartik,
that's also part of it.
Imagine this is the World Cup final, and it's Germany against Brazil in the final, and almost right before the final whistle, Brazil gets an incident where it should have been a penalty. The referee rules it's not a penalty. He blows the final whistle, and Germany celebrates. They've won the World Cup. Yet again, this is a huge accomplishment. Fans go crazy around the world. Players are celebrating. Coaches celebrating. Brazilians are crying. And then, as they're getting up to the kind of getting ready for the trophy celebration, going up the steps, the VAR says, well, actually, that penalty incident at the end of the game, we've reviewed it again, and we believe that should have been a penalty, and blows his whistle. Okay, players need to come back out onto the pitch. I mean, that would be the most insane, most embarrassing, most pathetic moment in this sport. And again, we'll get into VAR for the World Cup a little bit later, but just VAR in general. You're right, Kartik. It's not a finished article. It's still in experimental mode. I'm happy, actually, that the Premier League has decided not to go through with it for next season. I think a lot of that's based on the FA and how the FA screwed it up even worse. Probably the worst examples of VAR were from the FA, so it's kind of unfair in that regard. But there's been problems in the Bundesliga. There's been problems in Major League Soccer. What a mess. This hopefully FIFA has their act together, because this could be a huge embarrassment for the sport worldwide. Yeah,
and obviously what you outlined is a doomsday scenario, Chris, but there's going to be some controversy at the World Cup with VAR. And I even have now American sports fans who are used to replaying their sports saying, I'm not sure about it in soccer, because it's just fundamentally a different type of sport where you play without those sorts of stoppages. So it's mentally, you're, as a footballer, you're trained. Look, if you've grown up with the possibility of all these stoppages as a player, think about it just from a player's perspective. It might be different, but what we're finding now is that players are switching off. Mentally, it's having an impact. It's muting goal celebrations even in the Bundesliga. I've noticed this season where someone will score a goal and then they'll look over to see if it was a goal. Yeah. So it's just it's an unfinished article, and yes, technology is a good thing, and getting calls correct is the prefer. We would prefer that to getting them incorrect, obviously. But this isn't cut and dry. This is not black and white. For some people, they act like it's a black and white issue. Well, you want the call to be correct, don't you? You want sporting merit to triumph. That's not always the necessarily the best outcome in these sorts of situations, because there is a certain feel and flow to a match that gets interrupted. And, as a colleague of mine asked me the other day, now what are we going to do with some of these VAR incidents if they change things 2 minutes later? Are we going to go back and nullify everything that happened after the VAR incident? If this happens this summer, let's say in the World Cup, and during the flow of a match, and it's 2 or 3 minutes and the VAR official comes back, I don't think the guidelines have been set strongly enough. And I would once again say, I've said this many times on the show, MLS, there's a lot, we criticize MLS a lot, right? The one thing MLS has gotten right is on VAR, they haven't allowed it, with 1 or 2 exceptions since implementing it, to rip out the fabric of the matches. It's been kind of a very quick bang thing. Now, you could also criticize MLS saying, well, they're not reversing as many calls. There's still a lot of bad calls that are standing, whereas in the Bundesliga, everything's being reversed. That's true, but it's not, in MLS, it's not affecting the enjoyment of a particular match the way it is in Germany, or from what I understand, at times in Italy and in the Dutch league as well.
Yeah, it's a sport. There's tons of emotions involved. This is not Judge Judy, where we have to kind of look at the evidence and have people forensics and investigating. Okay, well, this was off by a millimeter, and it would ruin the sport in many ways. Somebody on Twitter, one of our followers, I can't remember who it was, but mentioned that with cricket, there's like a 15-second rule. So after an incident happens, there's 15 seconds to go ahead and actually flag it if VAR sees something controversial that they need to go back to. And I think that's a good rule too, because maybe it's 15, maybe not 15 seconds, maybe it's 30 seconds, but it's something where there's a time limit there, because otherwise, like I said, 2 or 3 minutes afterwards, do they have to go back because they just noticed something?
Yeah, it happens quickly in cricket, but in cricket, they're also normally these, when they go to the video, and they have the same motion, cricket umpires as soccer referees with the video screen. Yeah. There is a test of like 3 things that they knock off really quickly. I'm blanking out on my quick cricket terminology, but it's done more efficiently in cricket. They don't have those protocols in soccer yet, that they do in cricket. So that's a very good point. An astute point by that listener.
Yeah, so let's jump back into the Premier League and some of the other things we've been watching this past week. So I watched the Newcastle Arsenal game on Sunday morning. This is really a joy to watch. This is as a neutral, a really entertaining game. Newcastle were up for it. Arsenal, in spells, were playing some great football. And John Joe Shelvey was on fire. I mean, just like long range passes, like 40-yard passes, just pinpoint. Not even just him, but Iossi Perez having a great game too. And what an incredible achievement by Rafa Benitez this season. They're in the top 10. Yeah. Looked like they were going to go down, and with limited resources. And actually, it was perfect timing, too, because you had Lee Dixon there in the studio to give his analysis of Arsenal's defensive mistakes. Yeah. So that was perfect. I mean, just to have him, you could tell that, emotionally, he's upset, but he was able to kind of just share some of his insight about just kind of juvenile, like high school soccer type of mistakes in the defense there for Arsenal. Now, it's interesting, Kartik, because when I watched this weekend, I missed most of Saturday's games. Again, my kids had soccer games, so I was on the run. But Sunday I had more time to watch most of the games. But it was interesting, too, because I don't know if it was the time difference. I mean, with the games starting a lot earlier in the day in the US than what, say, Lee Dixon or Graham Lasoa used to, rather than, say, later afternoon or evening kickoffs. But they seemed a little bit kind of jet lagged, but also a little bit tired. I mean, their analysis was good. It just didn't seem to be as spot on as, say, Kyle Martino or the two Robbies. And again, that could be also just not being used to being in that environment at NBC while those guys have been doing it for a few years. So that I thought was interesting. Graham Lasso and Lee Dixon were great, though. And it just shows what the level of commitment that NBC Sports has. I mean, in terms of sending all of their crew to the UK and then sending the UK crew to the US and doing it in a weekend. Some great games, too. But, I mean, again, you look at other networks, no one else is doing this. And that level of commitment and I mean, really kind of cost, the amount of money they're spending to do this was a great example of just how they're always trying to mix things up this season more than others. I think they're trying different things, and it's still entertaining. Even more so, Kartik, actually, this is a good example. So after the Newcastle Arsenal game, I was like, you know what? I'm thinking about switching over to watch, I think the Schalke game, the Schalke Dortmund game. And I was like,
oh, I should mention I watched that game. I was switching back and forth. That's what I knew. I'd forgotten the game from Sunday. I watched that, and just real quickly, Dortmund is a mess right now.
Yeah. They have been for a while this season. It's been a really bad season for them. Yeah. But so I was watching the Newcastle Arsenal.
Although significantly, I think this is going to be the first time Schalke's finished ahead of them in the league in about a decade, or since 2009-2010 season when Manuel Neuer was Schalke's goalkeeper. That we know what a big derby that is. Mm-hmm. So this is a bad time for Dortmund, but continue. Sorry.
Yeah, so I was watching the Newcastle-Arsenal post-match, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to watch the Schalke-Dortmund game because I'm sure that's going to be a good one. But the analysis that that NBC gave was so good that I stayed with that broadcast. I was like, you know what, I'll watch the post-match analysis. And then it went into the pre-match analysis for Man United against West Brom, and you had Kyle Martino, you had the two Robbies at Old Trafford, at the stadium, giving kind of pitch-side interviews, and Robbie Earle up in the commentary, Gantry there. And it had me hooked. I was like, I can't change the channel. I got to watch this and then watch the Man United West Brom game. And to me, that's a perfect example of the investment that they're making, the commitment, and how it really kind of deters people from watching other broadcasts or other leagues when you've got such great analysis. And you can't say that for I don't think any other really broadcasters, whether it's ESPN or beIN Sports or Fox or others. For the most part, once the game's over, I'm gone. I'm not going to hang around, especially for half an hour when I could be watching another great game. Yeah,
certainly. And I think having Lee Dixon in the studio for Man City's league triumph was significant because obviously he grew up a Manchester City fan. So having him for Arsenal's defensive mistakes on Sunday morning against Newcastle, and then having him for City's triumph, even though they didn't play that day, them claiming the title was actually maybe you could call it a stroke of genius by NBC, maybe just some very good luck for Tour de luck that it was this weekend they brought him over.
Yep. So the second half of Man United against West Brom I missed. I was traveling, so I didn't get to see the celebrations. I mean, or the kind of the announcement that Man City's won the title. So Kartik, what are your thoughts in terms of how the coverage was and the goal zone and whether they did a good job or bad job?
I thought they did a very good job. The only issue is that it's almost as if they stopped talking about the game that they had just. The West Brom Manchester United game. They just spent a few minutes on that and then talked about Manchester City's season. I think, and this is where NBC maybe doesn't give the perspective, but then again, they are the broadcaster of the Premier League and they don't broadcast other leagues. That I think Manchester City's triumph is also how at ease they triumph is a strong indictment of the Premier League, especially when. I mean, we're now 7 years into Manchester City in Europe, right, in the Champions League, and they've never looked the part in Europe, even when they've advanced, even when they've made a deep run, like under Pellegrini a few years ago to the semifinals. This season, consistently, Manchester City would play on a Saturday, rip a team to pieces in the Premier League, then go into Europe and struggle, even when they were winning, even against the PSVs and the Shakhtars. It would be a much more labored performance, much more difficult to break that opposition down, much more difficult to really kind of get going in those matches, leaving a lot of those matches late. And then we've obviously seen the crash out in the knockout stages. Basel, second leg, they got beat, but they won on aggregate, and then the two legs against Liverpool. So I think it is a bit of an indictment of the Premier League, the ease with which they won the title, and that wasn't really discussed. But what was discussed, and I think they continued to discuss it through the course of the week when Robbie Mustoe and Robbie Earle came back into the studio midweek for those matches, was the impact Pep Guardiola has made on tactics in England, and how the other managers are reacting to him, and actually this goes back to Lasso and Dixon on Sunday, how because Rebecca Lowe said, well, he did it his way, his style, and Lee Dixon said, well, but actually tactically from match to match, Manchester City looks very different. He makes changes in the squads. They play with a different formation often, where the team sheet will look the same, right? It'll look like they're lining up in a 4-3-3 or whatever. But that, as Dixon and Lasso pointed out, you'll see Fabian Delph in a different position, moving into a different position, Kyle Walker moving into a different position based on opposition, which has then led other Premier League managers to have to respond and react to that. And then I think also the other takeaway from NBC is with Guardiola, Klopp, and Pochettino. That's three of your top four right now in England. You've got three managers really committed to high-intensity pressing, and now Pochettino is also kind of transitioned Spurs towards trying to keep the ball more possession. So the entire style of at least the top of the league is evolving. So I thought that was all very poignant and good analysis from NBC's co-commentators.
Yeah, it's just a shame that in terms of the way that City won the title, it was just really kind of just so anticlimactic, really, so underwhelming. Yeah. Just, I mean, that's not a way you want to see a team win a title, even though they thoroughly deserve it. I mean, that's and actually even for me too, West Bromwich Albion, yes, they're bottom of the league, but I don't think they're that bad of a team. I mean, the way that they've set up, especially with the new coach kind of in charge temporarily. Darren Moore, I think it is they're actually set up really well. They're tough to beat. And even last week's game against Swansea, Swansea had a tough time against them.
They made a decision, their board made a decision in the middle of the season that they were going to sack Tony Pulis. Okay, that's understandable given how things had started when they shut off when they got to 40 points last season. But replace him with a manager whose style and philosophy was diametrically opposite. And so you bring Pardew in, who has a style associated with him. I know a lot of people deride Alan Pardew, but he actually is kind of one of the more attacking British managers. Plays very open. That's why his teams have tended to be exciting even when they're not terribly good, like the Crystal Palace teams. But so West Brom is then trying to attack with players signed by Pulis over the course of 5 or 6 transfer windows. It just was never going to work. So I don't know why the decision was made to bring in Pardew specifically at that point, unless you were going to give him $50 million to spend in the January window and buy his type of players, right?
But that's the thing about West Brom and Stoke. I think both of the sets of supporters for those teams would say, okay, well, in the past we've had kind of tactics that weren't the most impressive. There was just more of a defensive mindset for both of those teams. But both the Baggies and the Potters have wanted to play more of an open, expansive, exciting brand of football, which we're now getting, and they've had from buying some exciting players. But it's coming back to haunt them. So I wonder for Baggies and Potter supporters, what do they want? Do they want something?
Southampton, because their complaints about Puel were stylistic. It had nothing to do with the results. They finished 8th. Yep. They got to the League Cup final. They should have won that League Cup final. It was Zlatan's brilliance that denied them that trophy.
Right.
But they waited a month to sack him in the summer. But the consideration, based on what Southampton has put out publicly, was entirely about style. Yep. Well, look at where they are now.
Speaking of style, Kartik, on Sunday I watched Atlanta United against NYCFC on FS1. This was one of the most exciting MLS matches I've watched in probably a few years. It was really, really good. The interesting thing about this one, actually a few interesting things about this one, is that the sound, the crowd noise on FS1 was better than the ESPN broadcast when I watched it, I think, the week before when they had Atlanta United on. So I'm not sure what Fox is doing with the sound, with the crowd noise. but it was a lot more entertaining, and it felt more natural than kind of the tinny kind of indoor kind of sound that ESPN had. So that makes a big difference. The other thing, though, too, is just like, they had John Strong paired with Alexi Lalas, and Lalas is okay, but to me, the person that they're missing is Eric Winalda. And if anyone's following Eric Winalda, especially on Sunday, he had some really great tweets throughout the game, kind of just some tactical analysis he was sharing and kind of pinpointing some of the mistakes that Tata Martino made for Atlanta United, and which cost him the 3 points. They could have gotten on to win this game comfortably, but NYCFC came back and got the tie. So that, I mean, to me, have Winalda in that position as a co-commentator and providing that tactical analysis is going to elevate your coverage versus Lalas, who's good, entertaining, but not as good as Winalda when it comes to kind of that X's and O's, which I really enjoy. And then Kartik on Monday, I think, watched the West Ham Stoke game, and God bless Andy Carroll, because that was like about 2 minutes away from Stoke City winning that match, and that would have made some even nervier times for Swansea City supporters. But Andy Carroll gets a late equaliser in that one, and Stoke's hearts and hopes are crushed again. All right, Kartik, let's move on to TV streaming news. Lots of news this week. So let's kick off with ICC.
Yeah, so we have the details about the 2018 edition of the International Champions Cup, which will feature matches on 3 continents, Asia, North America, and Europe. Several matches in Singapore, several matches in New York, Miami, Los Angeles, Chicago, and culminating with Atleti playing at their own stadium, at the Wada Stadium, against Inter in August. We're also going to have a women's tournament this year, which is going to feature Manchester City, the North Carolina Courage, Chelsea, and PSG. So that was it was an interesting announcement on Tuesday, because what I think we came to realize, Chris, you and I were both there, was that this competition, if you want to call it that, this event, but there's still some discussion whether are these friendlies or is this an actual legitimate cup competition. It depends who you ask what the answer is. But this is now gained significant traction with the top European clubs, that they all want to be here. They all want to be part of this in order to either market themselves in the United States or in Asia, or just get really high-level preseason matches before they start their league campaigns and European campaigns in August. So even in a World Cup year, they're able to get 18 of the biggest name clubs on the men's side, and four on the women's side. It's not a World Cup year on the women's side, but it's growing every year. And I have to say, as someone who a few years ago was skeptical about whether this was sustainable, whether this thing was actually being taken seriously, it's really become a massive event, not only in the United States, but I just perusing the global media, as I often do, and write for British publications. It's a big event everywhere. Everybody is covering it and taking it quite seriously.
Yeah, the takeaways for me were 18 of the biggest teams from around the world. Obviously, I think they're all European teams. But
yeah.
I had a scratch in my head. I was like going through this 18. I'm like, okay, who's missing? Which big club is missing here from that list? And there really isn't. Those are the 18 biggest clubs in Europe playing around the world. The second takeaway is that each of these teams will be playing 3 games. And the way they're setting it up this season is that it's going to be a league table. So each of those teams plays 3 games. And at the end of the August 15th or whenever it is, it ends. It goes from late July to mid-August. They'll know what the league table is, and they'll know who finishes first. And, of course, goal difference and looking at that. And then whoever wins that title, wins the International Champions Cup, will be awarded that trophy at their first home game of the season. So that I like in terms of the way it's set up. It's pretty straightforward. No complications there. In the past, they have had complications about the way it's been set up. That's interesting, having a global league, because some of these teams will be playing in Asia and not playing in North America. And then I guess another takeaway is the television coverage. So ESPN is back this season again with ICC. You've got most of the games are on ESPN or ESPN2. and there's a couple that are on ESPN News and ESPNU, but for the most part, it's ESPN and ESPN2. I mean, you've got some massive matches. You've got Man United against Liverpool at Ann Arbor in Michigan. You've got Bayern Munich against Manchester City. I mean, you go down the list. They have all of the 4 finalists in the semifinals of the Champions League. This is huge. Now, critics would say, Kartik, well, most of these players are going to be playing in the World Cup, and most of them won't be available to actually play in the tournament. But to me, I mean, my argument is that this is much bigger than just the stars. This is about the clubs. If you're a fan of Manchester United, you're going to watch Manchester United play. And maybe a couple of the players, a few of the star players won't be playing because they've been rested after the World Cup. But you're a supporter of the club, and you're going to go out there and support the Red Devils, or Manchester City, or Bayern Munich, or Dortmund, or you go down the list, or whoever it is. So that's I think the clubs are much bigger than the players, and for a tournament like this, that fits in really well. I'm trying to think if there's any other takeaways I had from this.
Yeah, I think that German clubs coming for change is maybe the takeaway, because generally because of when their cup competition begins, they have not been able to come. Now, what I've noticed is if you look at the schedule, the German clubs leave earlier,
right.
And given the probability that Germany goes deep in the World Cup, maybe even wins the World Cup, you're probably not going to see a lot of the German national team players with Dortmund or with Bayern, but you will see some of their other stars. I mean, it depends how far Colombia gets or Poland gets, whether you see James or Robert Lewandowski. And certainly for Dortmund, there's an assortment of players that are not the Polish. There were Polish players also, but assortment of other players that might be there. So, and I think you're right. In most cases, the clubs are bigger than the names, the individual player names. Now, the one exception to that would be the number of people who want to see Neymar with PSG. That would probably be the exception, and we'll see how that drives interest in potential PSG games. But other than that, I think you're right on that.
Yeah, and of course you got Christian Pulisic. So I mean, the Dortmund games by themselves will be some big numbers in terms of the number of tickets sold for those games. Just to see that one player. I mean, that's one example of how a player is almost as big as a club, but that's a little bit different with him being from the United States. And then Dortmund. So after the press conference, we had a chance to talk to Dortmund, an executive and a former player there. I'm not sure about you, Kartik, but some of the interesting points that they raised to me, or that I took away from this, was that they've been focusing on Asia a lot. So almost every summer they've played in Asia. This is the first summer that they've actually come to the United States since 1950 something, when they came to Chicago. That was the only time they've ever come to the United States. So really, it's in the modern era. This is the first time Dortmund's ever come, and what they've focused on is looking at Japan, looking at Asia, looking at China, Singapore, and going there with an open mind in regards to how to kind of connect with communities, with the soccer schools, with the fans. And that was my takeaway, is that they've learned a lot from those experiences, and I've taken those away, and probably will use some of those, or will test some of those in the United States. But I know that they're focusing big time on the US. They're coming here after the season. They're coming here for May 22nd to play LAFC in a friendly, and then coming back then for the ICC at the end of July, which is a pretty big commitment.
Yeah, and I think that they are behind in the U.S. market. Let's not kid ourselves, and they have a lot of ground to make up. But it seems like they have a plan to do that, to at least try to do that.
Yeah, they're behind, but in some ways, I mean, Arsenal, again, it's another summer where they're not coming to the United States, and we know that they have a huge profile in the US and a huge fan base. Dortmund is certainly rising. So I think it's good timing for them. My
guess is once Wenger is gone, you'll see that change with Arsenal. I think he likes to prep in Asia. So
he liked to prep in Austria before. He wouldn't leave Austria for the longest time, but oh well. All right, so moving on, Kartik. Next up is that former Mexican goalkeeper Moises Munoz has joined has joined Fox Sports broadcast team for the World Cup. So he'll be providing analysis for Fox, mostly I'm sure about El Tri, about the Mexican national team. Now, if memory serves me right, I think Moises Munoz, I think we had him on. I think it was on Fox, either for the CONCACAF Cup, the end of that, I think post-match, or it was one of the... I mean, he might have actually come on for Fox around about that time, but his English is very good. He's a good speaker. He seems to be very intelligent. So I think it's a good ad for Fox, especially with their Mexican coverage. And we've seen that the numbers haven't been that strong, so maybe that can help give them a lift.
I think it's a good ad from a commentary standpoint. I just, again, it kind of tells you their priorities, and they're trying to push hard on the Mexican angle. And I'm not sure that that's going to work. It's also probably going to turn off fans of other Latin American countries, if I'm being perfectly honest with you.
Let me jump in there too, because I saw an interview this morning with Kathy Carter by Sports Business Journal, and they asked her about the World Cup this summer. So what are your thoughts about the World Cup? Like, with the US not in it, like, what do you think? Is that going to hurt soccer? And she's like, no, it's going to hurt the fans, the US fans. Obviously upset that the team's not in it. But she said, I think most of those fans will go ahead and support Mexico, and we'll cheer for them. And I'm like, oh my God. which I don't know. Just you know what I mean? It's such a stretch, and I think a lot of that too. I mean, to me, it comes back to the Sum relationship, because I mean, El Tri, the Mexican national team and the U.S. men's national team are so intertwined from a Sum approach, where Sum is promoting and setting up these friendlies across the United States for Mexico, and of course the U.S. friendlies too, and U.S. games. That they're so intertwined that they think that the fans, the spectators, the supporters are going to just say, you know what, like, U.S. is not in it, I'm going to support Mexico this summer. What the heck?
How does this reconcile within the past on Fox, Alexi Lalas saying Mexico-U.S. is the biggest rivalry in soccer, which is nonsense, right? It's not. I mean, Argentina, Brazil, the Dutch and the Germans, Italy, Spain, I mean, these are all bigger rivalries, right, with more global importance in terms of, and then if you're just talking about club level, you could go, we're just talking about Dortmund, Schalke, et cetera, those sorts of rivalries. But he said that. Now, Lawless at the same network is in a position where he's having to try and sell this myth that U.S. fans should root for Mexico or would naturally root for Mexico. The only reason that is because of a business relationship dictated by Soccer United marketing. I mean, it is the two federations, the two leagues, the two top leagues in each country are completely intertwined from a business standpoint, and that's now impacting strategic decisions about coverage of the sport.
Yeah,
that's something, in the bigger picture, people should be concerned about. I think. I mean, that's my perspective, at least.
Yeah, to me, it's inauthentic. I mean, it's not authentic coverage. It's not authentic realism of how the world plays. I mean, how the US is in terms of how they support their national team. They're not going to switch allegiances just because their team's not in it. Yes, they will probably look at the 32 teams, look for an underdog, or look for a team that maybe they have other connections to. And for some Americans, it's going to be the Mexican national team because maybe they're bilinguals, maybe they're from a Mexican heritage, maybe they have,
I tell you, for many, though, I've talked to, it's Iceland or it's Portugal or it's England. Those are probably Germany. Those are the top four I've heard. Exactly. It's not Mexico.
Yeah. All right, Kartik, let's move on to the next section. Actually, next news item, pardon me.
Yeah, so Gold TV has launched a new streaming platform in Canada called Gold TV Play, which includes the Portuguese Primeira Liga to Canadian residents. The service is another OTT service is $9.90 Canadian dollars per month.
US dollars.
US dollars. Sorry. Gold TV Play is a pay-as-you-go service, so you don't have to necessarily subscribe.
Yeah, I asked Gold TV on this one too, in regards to a US launch, and they said they have nothing to announce at this time. So I'm sure at some point Gold TV, probably if they acquire some other rights too, will probably try to put together a package and jump into the streaming space. I guess for Canadian residents, I guess it's up to you. I mean, if it's the Portuguese league, if you like that, that's probably a good sell. If you're not into the Portuguese league, then it's probably there's nothing there for you. But I guess it depends on each individual. Moving on, the other thing that we did this week, Kartik, in addition to the International Champions Cup press conference, is we went to visit Telemundo Deportes' new headquarters in Doral, in Florida, outside Miami, and this was an incredible experience. Just seeing this brand new building. It's estimated to have cost about $200 million. But just the investment they've put into this, not just even the investment, but just the planning, the architecture, the way that this building is set up to really be a cutting edge, kind of state-of-the-art studio, and housing their offices too, and having everything self-contained into one building. So you not only have not just the sports department, but you have the drama, you have the soap operas, you have the news departments, all into one building. And it's really a huge statement of intent, really, I think, from Telemundo in regards to where they're heading. And they've got the World Cup this summer, of course. They're moving. They're definitely making huge waves in the United States, and it's going to be exciting, I think, for people that work there. And hopefully for us, I mean, stateside, we'll be able to actually see some good coverage coming out of this studio, not just in Florida too, but also in Russia too.
Not only that, I think it just reinforces NBC Universal's commitment to growing Telemundo to being a legitimate eyeball-to-eyeball rival, or however you want to describe parity with Univision. I mean, for years, Telemundo has been kind of that Pepsi to Coke, right? They've been this weak number two, or they're number two, but they're not at that level. We don't think of them. We don't talk about them in the same breath we talk about Univision. Now that gap is closing, and this is a large part to do with NBC Universal. I think since the Comcast takeover and the commitment they've shown to really build Telemundo into an increasingly aggressive and prominent property among Hispanic dominant, even English language dominant Hispanics, again, among Hispanics, Latinos throughout the country. So really enjoyed the tour, and Telemundo is a entity to keep an eye on.
Yeah, the other thing too, we happened to be there when they were taking a staff photo of the sports department, and one of the people there told us that I think about 70% of those people are actually going to Russia. They're going to be, I mean, it's going to be a huge presence that Telemundo is going to have in Russia, and that was impressive too. Of course, a lot of people will be staying also in Miami to help out on that side of things. But they're putting, I mean, tons of investment into making this one. It's their first World Cup, so it's exciting. The other thing too is just walking around the building, seeing so many people wearing shirts. I mean, jerseys, whether it's Argentina, Spain, club jerseys. I mean, you name it. That was great to see. Kind of a really good. They're excited. You can tell that they're huge soccer fans, and they're going to really, really embrace this World Cup.
It's better when soccer fans cover soccer than when non-soccer fans do, which, that was part of the culture at ESPN, just as an aside, that John Skipper really tried to drive home to his employees to get them. And this is why I think 2010, 2014 were so different than 2006. Skipper, I think, really kind of pushed the cultural side of the sport and getting people into understanding the sport and living it and breathing it before they went to South Africa in 2010. And that's why their coverage, besides their commitment to different commentators, different types of commentators in 2006, was so much better. That's something I'm really looking forward to with Telemundo.
All right, let's move on to the next news item, Kartik.
Sure. beIN Sports has launched LaLiga TV, a new channel on beIN Sports Connect, produced by LaLiga. The full HD channel will include all LaLiga games live. It will also feature the core programming of LaLiga, an exclusive new studio show analyzing the action before and after each match, twice daily news bulletins throughout the week, and reruns of the current season games. It sounds really good, really interesting, and beIN has launched this.
Yeah, I wish we had that for the Premier League on NBC. We have NBC Sports Gold that has some coverage, but not nearly as much as that coverage. That's definitely a huge slam dunk for La Liga fans. And you can get beIN Sports Connect through your cable provider or satellite provider, or if not through there, you can also get it through Fubo TV or iGoal.tv. Last but not least on our news segment, Kartik, is FIFA has announced more details about their VAR for the World Cup this summer. They'll have 4 VAR officials in a studio in Moscow for every game and a pitch-side camera for the referee if he needs to take a closer look at an incident. One of the 4 VAR officials will communicate with the referee throughout the game as the game is unfolding, and will make him aware of any incidents that happen, such as offside or anything he might have missed. Replays will also be shown on giant screens inside the stadiums. And that is good, Kartik, because I think in many ways that's the thing that the FA was missing, is that the referees were making decisions because of the aid of VAR through their headsets. They were hearing what the VAR officials were saying, but we had no idea what was going on. Neither did the commentators. So I think this will be a big help as far as communicating exactly what's happening, so that the viewers are not lost. They know what's happening as well as the commentators. One more thing about this is that Pierluigi Collina is heading up this campaign. So if you were to give it to anyone that could make this a success, it's going to be a huge task. But Collina is definitely the person to do it. So I'm a little bit hopeful that this can work, but I have my doubts, Kartik.
Yeah, it's arguably the greatest referee of all time. So that's the right guy, but it's still it's a momentous task, to say the least.
Right. All right, moving on to TV ratings. And of course, we've got all of the numbers at worldsoccertalk.com. So if you want to go kind of take a deep dive into those, we'll share some of the bigger numbers or some of the numbers that jump out at us right now. 1.1 million people for Club America against Monterrey. Another big number for Liga MX. This was on Univision last Saturday. The Bournemouth-Liverpool game, Kartik, that you referenced on NBC, that had 908,000 viewers. On Saturday, Club America against Toronto in the CONCACAF Champions League. More impressive numbers for that. That was 886,000 viewers there. Now, looking at some of these other games, Kartik, the one that jumps out to me is Atlanta United against NYCFC. It was a fantastic game to watch, really exciting, great football, great atmosphere, pretty good broadcast, and 197,000 viewers. This is on FS1 on a Sunday evening during prime time, which you would expect those numbers to be much greater. As a comparison, you had Crystal Palace against Brighton, a relegation battle, on Saturday on NBCSN, Saturday morning, and that one had 278,000 viewers. So it's about close to 90,000 more viewers for a game, a relegation battle. Which is more meaningful in some ways, but you would expect Atlanta United against NYCFC. I guess, Kartik, it goes back to this age-old question: why the New York markets are suffering still so much? You would think, a huge metropolitan area. Why aren't people tuning in to watch a game like this? And Atlanta United being one of the most attractive, exciting teams in the league, why aren't people from across the United States watching this game?
Context, relevance. Knowing when the match takes place, right? But we can criticize that, but MLS did try and keep consistent broadcast windows the first few years of this television contract, or at least year one, definitively in 2015, but also I think a little bit in 2016. Just didn't work. So I don't know. There's just no solution to it. And I know people are lauding the CONCACAF Champions League ratings, saying, oh, the tournament's doing great. Look at how many people are watching Toronto, how many people are watching Red Bull. No, they're watching it because of America and Chivas, okay? You could throw America and Chivas out against anyone in this country and get the kind of viewership they're getting. Now, granted, I still think it's impressive because it's Univision Deportes on a weeknight. It's not on big Univision, and it's not weekend matches. But it is because of the competition. It's been great for CONCACAF to have America and Chivas in this tournament this year, advancing deep instead of Monterrey, Tigres, and Toluca, because those Mexican teams don't drive numbers in the U.S. the way the big two do. But as far as MLS is concerned, there's just no change, right? It's just not. There's no improvement.
All right, let's move on to Listener Mailbag. The first up is somebody by the name of Peter Drury, who's the commentator for the Premier League. And he emailed us. So he listened to last week's podcast, and we talked about the Barca-Roma game that was on Facebook Live, and we had the commentary from Fox. So we missed out on the Peter Drury commentating this match, one of the best probably calls all season long, and we were able to kind of grab that audio and play it. So if you missed it, listen to last week's podcast because it is an incredible call for that game. So Peter Drury says, thanks for your very kind comments. I completely understand that my style lends itself to the suspicion that it may be pre-scripted. However, please feel free to tell your listeners and readers that perhaps unprofessionally, I hadn't even considered the possibility of Roma winning the tie, and I certainly hadn't prepared any words. Clearly, as you rightly pointed out, it is ridiculous to think that I could have prepared specific words for a Greek scorer. I would never eat or sleep if I took account of every remote possibility like that. This is not being overly sensitive to criticism. Every commentator has to accept that he won't please every viewer. If some people don't like my style, I can live with that. But I'm afraid I have to confess to a lack of premeditation in Rome this past week. Spontaneity still exists. And that sums it up perfectly too, because that's always been the suspicion with Peter. And it's his style, and that's something that just in the last week or two I've learned that that's his style, and it's not that it's pre-written, and it works. Some people love Peter, some people don't like Peter, but it's definitely great to have his feedback. One more thing, Kartik, on this too is that he also mentioned. I won't read it word for word, but he mentioned how much of a difference it makes having the announcer in the stadium to call a game versus calling it off the tube or off the monitor. And he said that there's no way possible that somebody calling the game off the tube or off the monitor could have given a commentary or a call like Peter Drury did, because Peter Drury really was able to describe what was happening, but then describe what was happening off camera. He was talking about the coach didn't know what to do. He's running all over the place. The players are celebrating. The sheer atmosphere in that stadium, just electric noise. And to be able to be in the stadium and to actually explain what's happening and put those in words for the people at home around the world, except the United States, to actually experience and enjoy that's beauty. That's fantastic, and that's something that he said that you can't get when you're calling the game off the monitor or off the tube. So that's a clear-cut example of really the importance of having commentators at stadiums, and I think that's one of the reasons why the NBC's coverage of the Premier League has been so good. Is you've got those guys in the stadiums, as opposed to say John Strong calling it from a studio or an office in Los Angeles, and he's trying to capture their emotion, but you can't quite get that same emotion.
Speaking of Peter Drury, there have been a number of fans who've talked to me since the Winter Olympics this past February, who said, they obviously we get Peter Drury and the international feed a lot for Premier League games and occasionally for Champions League and Bundesliga and some other things. But it was great having him as part of the NBC broadcast, pre-game, post-game. Really kind of they like his cadence, they like the way he calls a match, and would like to see him more doing the dedicated U.S. coverage. So he's definitely developed a following in this country. And this goal call, even though it wasn't shown in the U.S., I think it went viral enough that enough American fans of football saw it. And his stock is rising in this country.
So next up is Jose, and he posted this on worldsoccertalk.com. He says, Chris, all compliments on this podcast and generally on the way you're running this website. I really don't know of any other place, internet, TV, or radio, where we can find this kind of information about media presentation of the soccer in the United States. Also, after reading some comments on your articles, I have pretty much a clear picture of the subscription versus free TV issue. In the same way that pharmaceutical companies are the biggest beneficiaries of the opioid crisis, ESPN, Turner Sports, NBC, and Who's Next are perfectly exploiting our soccer addiction. They know that we don't have any problems to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning Pacific time to watch the Sheffield Derby, that we are in jeopardy to be caught by the boss while watching Bosnia versus Lithuania in the European qualifiers, or that we are understanding and enjoy specific British humor of ESPN FC presenters. And lots of us are happy to pay for that addiction. My problem is where will this stop? And how many of us will be happy with the final solution of this equation? And he said, okay, take the Champions League plus the Premier League plus La Liga plus Serie A plus Ligue 1 plus the Bundesliga, which is 6 leagues, and times $50, looking at the NBC Sports Gold and looking at ESPN Plus, that adds up to $300. And he's right, Kartik. I mean, they know that soccer fans generally have higher household incomes than other sports in the United States. They know that we are addicted, we're hardcore fans, and that we'll grumble about it, but many of us will pay.
Yeah, and we're seeing more and more OTT services, and I don't know where the line is going to be drawn. I think fans will draw a line at some point, but the broadcasters will push until they discover what that line is.
Next up is Paul Scanlon from via Twitter, and he says, I enjoyed the podcast. You should have watched Pompey, Portsmouth against Wigan last Monday. Fantastic match and atmosphere. I didn't see the game, but I did see on Twitter that somebody had posted, I think it was like 5 miles from Wigan Stadium, I think in the fields, and somebody had just recorded that you could hear the Pompey fans singing from about 5 miles away from the stadium.
Wow.
That was cool, because you're out in the middle of kind of, I don't know, wherever it was, some fields or farms, something, and you could hear the Pompey fans singing 5 miles away. Andrew,
which would be in Bolton, by the way, from Wigan.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Bolton's about 5 miles away, 5 to 7 miles away.
That's true. Andrew in Lexington, Kentucky said this through email. He says, with YouTube TV partnering with LAFC and Hulu just announcing a deal with the NHL and the Stanley Cup playoffs, when do you think Netflix will join the fray into sports soccer streaming? Could we ever possibly see the Gold Cup, Champions League or FA Cup distributed this way? Further, will it ever be possible for streaming companies to have sole TV rights like NBC does for the Premier League? What do you think, Kartik?
Yeah, that's a real interesting dilemma. And I also mentioned this week there is a local affiliate in Salt Lake area in Utah that is going to broadcast Real Salt Lake games as the sole streaming partner and geofence it to the area, but it's you have to pay for the service. It's OTT. So there's a lot of this happening, and I think Netflix has not done the kind of live programming. Obviously, they've dipped their toe in soccer now with the Juventus first team documentary. But I don't know, live streaming, you think because they've always been a kind of a cutting edge company that they're going to go into that at some point. It was surprising when YouTube went into it, right? Mm-hmm. And launched YouTube TV. I think it's a matter of time with Netflix, but I'm not sure it's imminent that they do that. And Hulu is acquiring these properties as we speak. You mentioned the NHL and the Stanley Cup playoffs. They're also doing some stuff with the NBA for the NBA playoffs. And then you also see now Facebook and Twitter getting their weekly Major League Baseball games also this season during the season, daytime broadcasts. So I think Netflix will enter the fray eventually.
In regards to Andrew's question about do you think it's possible for streaming companies to have sole TV rights like NBC does for the Premier League? I think so too. Yeah, it's just a matter of time. There's definitely streaming companies out there. It's happened sporadically in the past, in the last couple of years where you've had the Dutch League only being available through streaming companies. I mean, there's the smaller leagues, but it's just a matter of time. All right, last but not least, Bill Payne sent in this through email. He says, hello, guys. Hope all is well. In last week's episode, you discussed Copa America 2019 and CONMEBOL's potential debate over whether to invite Mexico because they didn't seem to be taking it seriously as they sent their U23 team last time. I was listening to the Total Soccer Show podcast last week in which they also discussed the issue, along with whether the U.S. should accept an invitation if offered. They mentioned that because there is a Gold Cup in 2019, the U.S. and Mexico, along with other CONCACAF nations, are required by FIFA to send their A teams to their home tournament, which almost necessitates that they send a B team to Copa America. If US or Mexico could send their A team to both tournaments, that would be ideal, but the clubs of the players would most strongly reject this plan. Anyway, just wanted to mention this as the Mexican Federation's hands may be tied as far as being able to send a strong team to Copa America. Thanks, and keep up the good work.
Yeah, that's correct. There was one time in 2007, Mexico tried to balance and take both tournaments seriously, and they were on the heels of one another, where they named similar rosters, but then rotated the squad pretty heavily to where the guys, their top players, played the knockout stages of the Gold Cup and the knockout stages of the Copa America, and they went through the group stages with younger players. That worked that summer, but they didn't win either tournament, right? They got to the semis of Copa and to the finals of the Gold Cup, and then starting in 2011, when there was overlap between the tournaments, the summers in 2011, 2015, they just went with pure B teams. Mexico, yes, your hands are tied by FIFA on that, but they, in 2007, were creative and tried to get around it, and they haven't attempted that since.
So if you have any questions for us, or you want us to read it out on air, any feedback, you name it, send us an email through web at worldsoccertalk.com, as well as facebook.com/worldsoccertalk, and on Twitter at worldsoccertalk. And Kartik, next up is our interview with Charlie Stillitano. It's about 10 minutes long. It's definitely worth listening to because he covers 3 different areas, one of which is why Major League Soccer teams are not in this tournament yet again. Second of all is talking about the success of the International Champions Cup and how it started and where it is today. And then third, and probably most interestingly, at least for me too, was the concept of the European Super League that's been talked about for many, many years, and whether ICC can or will replace that as a tournament. I mean, why have the European Super League when you have ICC? So let's go ahead and listen to that interview with Charlie Stillitano. So one of the questions I have is 18 European powerhouses, some of the biggest names in the world, but this time no Major League Soccer team again. I know in the past you've talked about maybe that would there be a way.
We've had them many
Galaxy,
times. Yeah.
Right.
And we've had them, and it's been terrific. The problem is just the schedule.
Yeah.
There's nothing to do with willingness. I had the same conversation with Mexican TV a minute ago.
Yeah.
We've had Club America in the past. We have the LA Galaxy. We've had the New York Red Bulls in the tournament.
Sure.
The problem is they have to play 3 games now.
Yeah.
Because the only way we can make it a true tournament with the odd schedules in the world is to say you're playing 3 games. Maybe 2 in Singapore, 1 in Europe. 3 in Europe, 2 in America, 1 in Europe, whatever it might be. But we feel if we have great teams, and I would include the MLS teams in here, that we would say if they all played 3 games, that's fine.
Right.
It's really hard with the MLS to get them to have 3 games off.
Right.
So they have to have 7 to 10 days off.
Yep.
And you know what happens up to now is they're in the middle of their season.
Sure.
So manager's going to say, I can't play my full team today because I got to save them for the weekend, a big game, and suddenly, they lose. It looks bad. And so there's nothing to do with desire. I think they want to be in it. We want them in it. We'd love to do it. We've spoken to MLS about it. We said we'd love to have you. We just spoke to the Mexicans here too again, saying we'd love, but understand that the European teams have 2 weeks of this.
Exactly.
And I would never dare to say, hey, can you guys move your schedule? That's not for me.
Right. Yeah.
But we're open. If they somehow can work it out so a couple of their teams can be off, they would 100% be in it.
So what was the decision not to go to Charlotte, to Nashville, and to go to Charlotte instead?
I'm trying to remember myself. The issue was a little bit tricky with U.S. national team is playing a game there.
Okay.
And we were trying to spread out a little bit the games in that sort of, I call it that region, that part of the world.
Sure.
It wasn't, again, we loved Nashville.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what was amazing? The players loved Nashville.
Really?
They loved Nashville.
Yeah.
And they thought it was just the coolest place, right? Because it's so Americana, right?
Yeah.
And although Charlotte's an amazing, amazing city, the players love Nashville too. So I think that unquestionably 100% will be there again. This year was just, again, a scheduling issue more than anything.
Okay, last question is, ICC has gone from what it was in the beginning, starting off, to what it is now, which is huge. What's it been like kind of being at the center of this experience, this journey, to go from what it started to what it has become and what it may become in the future?
Yeah, look, it's gratifying. It really is. I'm humbled by it. I really am humbled by it. it when teams call me and say, why can't we be in the Champions Cup, the International Champions Cup? And I feel kind of silly saying to them, well, I have too many teams this year. I'm filled up.
Right.
And I remember back, not long ago, we had to beg teams to come over here. And you had to talk to the manager. Today we got to do this. Come on, you have to show up here for the training the day before. And it was always such a fight.
Yep.
And now teams want to come. Yep. And I think that's really a tribute to, I'll probably single out a couple of managers that have been here, have had success. I always point to Sir Alex Ferguson talks about he loved it here from a training environment.
Right.
And he felt it was the best training environment.
Yeah.
We had to convince him, beg him is the right word, to play some of these big teams because I think the general sentiment was, I'm not going to play big teams in preseason. And I was just talking before that I remember going to see Manchester United against the Singapore 11 and Barthez played center forward.
Right.
So it was clearly a friendly game.
Right.
And it was kind of almost comical.
Yeah.
But it was, I'm talking about the football on the field. Yeah. But it was an event for Manchester United, more of a festival for people, their fans to see and touch. Sure. And I think that was the standard for friendly matches. When we convinced Sir Alex to come here and see these beautiful facilities and have his players away from the media and stuff, he loved it. Right. But then it was really, and he bought into, okay, I'll play these games, if I can say, more because you guys need it and I think it's important to do it. But I think that in 2003 and 4, he still writes about this in one of his books that Jose Mourinho showed him that you have to start out the season strong. Yep. And so in the past, you could afford to play a couple friendly games. Paolo Maldini talks about all the time. We'd start with 10 games in the preseason. We'd play against two local amateur teams, then a Serie D team, then a C team. Yep. Then you play one game maybe against a decent A-level team. You know? Yeah. But Jose's like, no, I want to be hard. I want to do it right away. And Sir Alex said, now, not only is training important, but competition's important.
Sure, absolutely.
And then the final thing that really changed everyone's mind, I think, was that the next myth was that, well, you're never going to win anything if you go over there. Right. And in 2009, Jose Mourinho had Inter Milan, Carlo Ancelotti had Chelsea, Leonardo had Milan. I can't remember the Club America coach, but they played all over the world, all over the country, LA to New York, and Dallas in between, everywhere in between. And that year, Jose's Inter won the treble, and Carlo's Chelsea won the double. So they went back and everyone said, well, wait a minute, these are the only teams that traveled to America this year and they won everything. So those two events, I think, sort of came together to change people's minds. And again, it's the managers. It's the Sir Alexes, the Joses, the Pep Guardiolas. Pep last year commented it was the best preseason he had had. Right. And so these are things that are, for us, we take a lot of pride in.
Sure. Just one last follow-up question, and that is, in some ways, does the ICC replace the idea of having a European Super League? Because there's been talk about that, but why have it when you have it every summer around the world?
Yeah, I mean, right here? People, again, as much as people may have pointed at me and Mr. Ross and stuff in the past, the reality is that's up to the European teams, up to UEFA, up to them. We are people here. Mr. Ross wants to build something. He wants to build the biggest and best, most prestigious tournament in the world. Now, we have a couple other official tournaments that are bigger, and so we recognize that. So we want to be as big as we can be. Right. And I don't know. I think what you're saying is an interesting question. I don't really honestly have an answer. It's a sense of, I think a lot of teams see the value in this and say, wow, this is great. This is enough. Look at all the publicity we're getting. We're in Asia, we're in America, we're in Europe. This is great. And maybe some teams are saying, well, maybe we can take it further. Again, that's in their court. And as much as I'd be arrogant, foolish, and a liar to tell you I can control that, so we just sit here and we're trying to do the best we can.
All right, Kartik, so where can listeners find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at KKFLA737 and just follow the links from there.
Excellent. And you can find me at World Soccer Talk. So thank you for listening. You can get a new episode of the World Soccer Talk podcast every Thursday. Every episode is released on SoundCloud, YouTube, Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, Audio Boom, and worldsoccertalk.com. If you like the show, share it with your friends on social media and give us a review. And Kartik, after a long week of lots of midweek games and still lots left there in some leagues around the world, maybe it's more relegation or more battles for Europe. What should they do this weekend?
Enjoy your football.